Hey everybody, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. One of the things about being a photographer is, at least for the most of us, is that we're self-taught. So we've taught ourselves how to use a camera, how to compose a photograph, how to take a picture. And so we've each developed our habits, some which are really good, some of which are bad. And it's really hard to discern which ones are good and bad if you have nothing to compare them to. But sometimes, if you take a class or you practice photography with somebody else, you gain some insights into what are strengths and what are weaknesses. And this week, I wanted to talk about the sort of the habit of photographing from the same perspective all the time. And usually, when we take photographs, the first impulse is to take it at eye level. We see the world at eye level, so just bringing the camera up to our eye and taking a picture from that position just comes naturally. And so we make the photographs, and the great majority of our photographs are from that perspective. But it doesn't always mean that that's the best perspective for a photograph. Sometimes we have to make a different choice that goes beyond simply choosing a wider focal length or narrower focal length or changing the exposure. It's the position from which we choose to make the photograph that really makes the biggest difference. And I think it's probably one of the hardest things to do just because we're so conditioned to just shoot from however high or tall we are. And I chose three images here that really demonstrate the importance of sometimes breaking away from that and remembering that there's more than one way to make a photograph. Our first shot is by Paul Swee. This was created with a Leica M10 at 1/4000th of a second at f1.4 ISO 200. Now, this picture is of a religious ceremony, and what little I know about it, the practice is that these hooks attached to lines are attached to the flesh of the person. And here we can see it's attached to his arms and his back. And I think this is part of sort of a meditative process where they try to go beyond whatever pain or discomfort is created by the hooks and the tension created by the lines pulling on the hooks, and it places them into sort of a meditative state where they go beyond the pain and get into a sort of a mental space that puts them in line with their spirituality in some way. And what I like about this shot that Paul made was his choice to position himself right behind the subject so that he uses the lines that lead to the hook as these graphic visual lines that lead us to the subject and those hooks that are embedded into the person's flesh. The choice to shoot it from behind allows him to use these lines, and use them as implied diagonal lines that serve as arrows that direct the viewer from the edges of the frame into the center of the frame where the focus of attention is on this man's body. And we also have the the eye line of all the different people in the at the edges of the frame and even in the distance, who are all looking at this figure as he's going through the motions of this particular activity. And the position from which he shoots creates a very distinctive and different image than what most people would shoot. Most people would be in front of the subject, making sure to include his face and including all the other things in the background. The lines and the hooks might be evident in the shot, but the focus would be more on the person's expression. It would be more of a document of the scene. And this shot is sort of a document of this moment, but it's a very graphic one because Paul here is seeing this scene in a very graphic way. It's not just about photographing what's happening. It's really taking into consideration the lines, the shapes, the tones between light and dark, and placing them together in a very graphic way as if it was a sort of a still life in which line and shape are key to composing a really interesting and a strong shot. And his choice to move into this position is something many people might not feel comfortable with because they don't want to intrude in the moment. But I'm so glad that Paul did, because this is a photograph that's only possible by making a different choice. Because if you came upon this scene and you were in front of this fellow, you might take all of your shots just from that position. And as Mary Ellen Mark used to say, move around your subject. Don't just commit to that initial point of view that you began shooting the subject from, because then that might not be the best solution. That might not be the best photograph. You have to move your feet. You have to move up, move down. It's not just about changing your exposure or changing your focal length. You physically have to move yourself in order to find the best shot. So don't get married to that initial position that you started with. It's exploring and making different choices and taking risks that really allow you to discover the best shot that's possible. Okay, here we have a shot by Linda Maclean. This was created with a Fujifilm X-T3 at 1/1600th of a second, 5.6, ISO 800. And this is yet another example of making a different choice. In this case, it's getting down to the child's level as she's playing with sand at this beach. And so many photographs that we make, especially of children, are often shot from our height down towards them. And when you change your camera position so that you're at eye level with the kids, the change in perspective is dramatic, and it can really transform the entire feel of the shot. Here, there are a lot of things at play that make this image really strong. First off, it's the camera position, which is even below this young girl's eye level. It's at about knee level. So the camera is shooting up towards her face. So the shape of her eyes, her lips, her nose are really cleanly defined against her skin. And she becomes this very prominent figure. I think Linda here is using a 23 millimeter, which is the equivalent of a 35 millimeter focal length. So it's fairly wide. And so the proximity of the child to the lens makes her really big within the frame, especially relative to the two women that are behind her. And I really like the relationship between her and the two figures that are behind her, playing or working with what I assume is a fishing net. And I like how she's sandwiched between those two people. And the fishing net serves as a nice backdrop. It's not just the sky that serves as a backdrop, it's actually the fishing net itself. And the colors are just wonderful here. We have the green and blue of her hat, the light greenish blue of her dress, the brown of her skin, and look how it contrasts with the colors of the outfits of the women behind her, as well as the net and the blue sky. And in terms of line and shape, they abound in this shot. The most dominant lines and shapes are created by the girl's body, and I love the way that her arms and her hands help to frame her in the scene, especially her knees in this shot, and the lines and shape that are created by her hat, and this line and shape that's created by the netting behind her, and the arms of these women here that help to basically frame her within this space. And then you have these lines and shapes in the background. We have the V shape of the bird, and basically a triangle here, and then we have a triangle here of this guy walking away. And I love how he's defined really cleanly by this triangular shape here, and how the color of his shorts complement the sort of the blue tones that are here. And one of the good things that also results from shooting at this low angle is that it likely eliminates a bunch of distractions in the background that if you were shooting at eye level would probably be included in the frame. Because I have no doubt that there were probably other people behind these two that would have been included in the frame had Linda been continuing to shoot at eye level and hadn't moved down. By moving down here, you eliminate any distractions that are behind these two women here, and you're able to selectively include just those elements that help complete the frame. And it makes for a wonderful shot. It's got nice light, line and shape, color and gesture, all the things that I talked about last week, how you combine all of those elements and create a really strong shot. It's a wonderful, wonderful frame. Before we get to the next shot, I just want to let you know if you want to contribute to the Flickr poll, all you have to do is go to your computer and go to Flickr and do a search on the Candid Frame and just ask to be added. But you have to make sure you use your computer and not your tablet or your phone. If you try to do it via your phone or tablet, you'll get a message saying that it's a private group and it's by invitation only. But that's only because you're trying to access it using your phone or tablet. Instead, just do it on your computer, and I usually get to it once a week, and I'll be glad to add it to your group so you can contribute to the community of photographers that we have here on the Candid Frame. Okay, here we have a shot by David Huskins, shot with a Canon 6D Mark II at 1,000th of a second, f8 ISO 800. So unlike the previous two shots, David here is shooting at eye level. He's not getting down to the ground to shoot up. But what makes this shot different for me is the fact that David's relatively close to the action, to the dragon on the left and the two figures who've ignited the fireworks, the firecrackers, and are covering their heads to avoid the loudness of the sound. And one of the bad habits I think a lot of us tend to have to resist is the distance from which we make photographs, especially those of people. I think part of it is informed by our desire not to invade somebody's space. And so we'll shoot from a certain distance all the time. And that may be like 10 feet, 12 feet, depending on the focal length, it can really vary. But that distance is pretty consistent. And sometimes shooting from further away is not going to give you the impact or the intimacy from the shot that you're probably hoping for. And you tend to do that a lot when you have a zoom lens that you're using, because the answer when you're using a zoom lens is always just to zoom in and to let the change in focal length do the work for you. But there's a difference between zooming into a scene and physically moving closer. You can really feel the difference in a shot that is made with a telephoto at a distance as compared to a relatively normal focal length or wide focal length, where that distance is abbreviated by the photographer moving in. I like this shot because of the intimacy it provides. He's using a somewhere between a 35 millimeter to 50 millimeter focal length on this full frame camera. And I think it's what adds impact to the shot. Because if someone was standing 15 or 20 feet away, even with a telephoto lens, the shot would feel very, very different. And I really like that going in provides you this sensation that you are right in this moment. It's one of the reasons why I tend to favor 35 to 28 millimeter focal lengths when photographing scenes like this, because I want to get into it. I want to feel like I'm in the very midst of all the action, all the emotion. And so even I have to resist that temptation to shoot from a certain distance all the time. I found that when I started using a 28 millimeter focal length, I had to half the distance that I was accustomed to shooting from when I used the 35 millimeter focal length. Because going from 35 to 28, I was including so much more in the frame, and it just wasn't working. All the different elements just weren't gelling for me. And it wasn't until I cut my distance and got physically closer that I was more effectively able to use the wider focal length. And I think that you'll find that to be the case for yourself as you go out and shoot. So it's not just making the choice to, put the camera low to the ground or higher than eye level. Sometimes it's just moving in and getting closer, especially when it comes to photographing people. All right, I hope you found that helpful. As a reminder, I am going to be in the DC area in late May, early June for the Focus on the Story Photo Festival. I'm going to be conducting a workshop there and leading a couple of panels. And it's a photo festival that's dedicated to photojournalism and documentary photography and street photography. And I think that if you are close to that part of the world, you don't want to miss it. I think it's going to be an amazing event. And if you want to sign up for my workshop while you're out there, there's still spaces available. So just visit focusonthestory.org and you'll find out more. And The Candid Frame is my podcast, which I've been doing for the last 13 years, where I interview photographers about their work and their career. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Barbara Peacock, who's working on this amazing project called American Bedroom, where she photographs people in the intimacy of their bedroom. She creates these beautiful painterly portraits of people in the most private space in their home, and the shots and the stories behind them are really amazing. And just the stories behind how she finds her subjects and what she does to create these photographs is phenomenal. You don't want to miss it. And if you want to check out the Candid Frame, all you have to do is go to the Candid Frame and download the Candid Frame app, or visit iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and just enjoy. And if you like what I'm doing here with this channel, well, you know what to do. Just give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.